Oh, looks like we reconnected again. Good, good. Anyway, I went to Google image search with bulbine and bulbinella and actually found a match on this, which was a type of species of bulbine. One thing that this had that none of the other bulbines had was a somewhat furry anther process, I guess you could call it. It had multiple, it looks like either multiple anthers or anther hairs. So it has the appearance of 6 furry little knobs right in the middle of the flower. Really interesting plant. So good, at least we're back here, and we're going to start again here. Okay, and so that was fascinating. I always love to do this kind of detective work with plants coming in. Let's go to some of the pictures and discuss the pictures. This is where we use the high technology of the Ustream producer software. Let's take a look at what we have. And oh, they don't make it easy. It's still not very easy to get these pictures up. Okay, so 029. And there we go. Now, for some reason, the interface they gave me, the Ustream interface, you have to reconnect the sound when you go to a picture. Don't ask me why that is. And this plant right here, doesn't that look fantastic? Look at those pom-poms. This is actually a pretty common plant you might know. This is Aeonium Schwarzkopf, also known as the blackhead Aeonium. And you can find this blooming up a storm. I've never seen blooms like this on an Aeonium. In our Canary Islands section, which is located just to the west of the African section. Check this out. They're really gorgeous. They're all over the place. And our Canary Islands section is fascinating, by the way. It's growing by leaps and bounds. Tim Phillips, who is our superintendent, is garnering this section, and it represents the incredibly diverse and extremely drought-tolerant, very well adapted to Southern California flora of the Canary Islands. One of my favorite places I've never been to that I can't wait to go to. Another thing on the Canary Islands is, I don't know if I mentioned this last week or last time, but we'll mention it again. Is this plant right here. This is, I think I mentioned this yesterday, but it bears mentioning again. This plant right here is a gorgeous little plant called Echium wildpretii. Tower of Jewels is the common name. And these plants, they grow in an area of Canary Islands which is much like an area in Hawaii where a similar plant grows. A similar looking but unrelated plant. The Hawaiian plant is the silver sword plant. This silver sword plant, I do believe, is in the Lobelia family, whereas this plant here, the Echium, is in a different family. I think it's in the waterleaf, the Hydrophilacea family. Don't hold me to that. They're both in different families, but they look extremely alike. And really fascinating thing is that their foliage is about the same too. The foliage is spear-like and very silvery. And it's this silvery foliage is thought to help the plant survive where it grows, and it grows in an area where not too many other plants grow, and that is the black clinkery lava fields of the Teide volcano, one of the largest and most active volcanoes in the Canary Islands. This grows in huge clumps. It's a biennial, and the silvery surface of the leaves reflects the infrared heat that is emanates from the black lava. It gets very hot there, and it's conductive heat. It's heat that actually turned into radiation, and that radiation is reflected. It's reflected by the leaves of this plant, much like an airstream reflects the heat away from it, an Airstream trailer, and stays cool without too much cooling, these plants' leaves do the same thing. And it's a classic case of parallel evolution, or convergent evolution, I'm sorry, where two plants look similar but they're not related at all. Their genetics are completely different. So they're the way they look, their structures are selected for to appear as they are, because they're dealing with the same kind of heat. They both develop silvery leaves, the silver sword and this plant here. Another interesting plant, this is another one of my, I have a lot of favorites, but I just kind of looked into this the other day, and this plant is called, the scientific name is Clerodendron chinense. Yes, it's from China. Known here as the glory bower. It's known in China as the stink jasmine. The stink jasmine. Why is it called the stink jasmine? Well, it's called the stink jasmine because, not because the flowers actually smell like very, very pretty, very delicately, almost a gardenia-like smell. It's not the flowers, but when you rub the leaves, they smell like bad peanut butter. And then, I mean, old peanut butter that's been out in the sun for a while. Not very appetizing and not very pleasing odor. Luckily, they only give off that odor if you rub them. So please, do not rub the stink jasmine leaves when you see this. This plant, by the way, is located just south of the tropical greenhouse. And there's a little trail that goes from the tropical greenhouse and it heads due east after a while to the Nepenthes, or the carnivorous plant greenhouse. And this plant is about 10 feet west of the trail before it turns east. So it's about roughly 20 feet southwest of the greenhouse door. So if you want to take a look at it, I think it's still blooming. If it's not blooming, you can still smell the leaves. Smell that great old peanut butter scent. Can't wait. This right here, you'll see a lot of if you come to the Arboretum right now. This is Tabebuia impetigonosa, known where it comes from as the ipe tree, also known as Pada arco. If you're a fan of alternative medicines, this is the tree where Pada arco comes from. Pada arco is apparently useful for arthritis. I probably should give it a try. I've got a little touch of rheumatism myself. Right now, this tree is starting to come into fabulous bloom. One of the problems we have with this plant, I wouldn't call it a problem, it's actually it's an asset, is that each of these blooms in its own little time period. Now, roughly they all bloom from somewhere between mid to late February up until the first part of May. But because they're seedlings, they have a lot of variance in when they bloom. So they don't all bloom at the same time. Right now we have probably 1/4 of the whole collection coming into bloom. Another fascinating thing is they start coming into bloom. Some of them will retain their leaves, others won't, until the very end when they finally drop all their leaves. Worth coming out to see this baby even now. It's just one of our top performers. The other top performers are a lot of our deciduous flowering trees like the cherries, etc. I wouldn't call this a deciduous flowering tree, although it can lose all its leaves. It's more like a semi-deciduous flowering tree. And this comes from an area where there's another one of our really beautiful performers, the floss silk tree comes from, and that is the Argentine, Paraguay area. The pampas, I guess is what you call it. It's a high grassy plateau. This area can suffer significant drought, and that's why most of these trees have some kind of mechanism that lets them survive drought. The Corycia actually has a water-storing stem, which is photosynthetic, and it can drop all its leaves for a great period of time. This tree right here can drop its leaves for a period of time, not for a long period of time, though. So that is Tabebuia impetigosa, the pink trumpet tree, also known as the purple trumpet tree for some reason. Pink or purple trumpet tree. And one more plant before we call it into this great session that we're having here. And it is a great session because we haven't had too many drops on the signal, and I'm still retaining the voice. You can still hear me. Always a good thing with this particular setup here. So we're doing really, really good. Let me show you this here. This is a very exotic tree. How's that there, huh? Look at that. That doesn't even look like a tree. That looks like a tornado of roots. This is Ficus thuningii, or Thonig's fig. It's native of West Africa. It produces a fruit in West Africa that's not only edible, but apparently has analgesic and anti-inflammatory properties. Now, what's always fascinating about a lot of our plants here is that a lot of them have medicinal use in the areas that they are native to. And one of the good things about the science of botany is that before it was too late, they realized that a lot of these plants did have uses that indigenous populations knew about, and it was not a bad idea to toss scientists into these societies to get this information and preserve it for all of history. And the reason is that a lot of these indigenous populations are being absorbed, unfortunately, into civilization, and when they are, all this knowledge of how these trees and plants are used is lost. So anyway, this does have some medicinal use, but what's really fascinating about it, it's one of the few ficuses in the Arboretum to have developed a substantial amount of aerial roots. Now, many ficus develop these aerial roots. It tends to be very common in this genus of plants, but this one has developed substantial aerial roots. There's at least a half a dozen that look like they are turning into trunks. Aerial roots are a way for these trees to increase their canopy size without having to substantially increase the strength of their trunk. And even then, if you look at what this is, the main trunk, and if you notice, down the main trunk is growing root structures. So apparently it's strengthening its own main trunk this way. So these trees are able to produce significantly wide canopies. Some of these canopies can be up to a quarter-acre wide. A quarter-acre wide canopy. Not this particular tree, but the Ficus bengalensis, also known as the banyan fig, will do that. If you've ever been to Hawaii, you've probably seen banyan figs all over. And, of course, you see them in the jungle ride over at Disneyland. Now, the reason this has formed these great roots is that before we cleared this area out, it was surrounded by a weedy bamboo that we had, that just kind of came there out of the blue. And this bamboo surrounded the tree and increased the humidity up around the tree. It's that increased humidity that caused this huge formation of these aerial roots. So when you get a chance, take a look at this thing. It's at the top of Talek Knoll. We have a waterfall, Mybrook Falls. Come get the map, look where the falls is. Go up the stairs there along the falls. You come to the top, there is a nice green lawn area there. Go 45 degrees to your right. So you want to head southwest, and you'll notice a little area that looks like a crater that's called the Bowl. Walk along the southern lip of the bowl, and you can't miss it. It's on the southwest side of that depression we call the Bowl. Well, that's it for... Oh, we went almost a half hour. Not bad. That's it for today's Questionable Botanist. I am Frank McDonough, your Questionable Botanist, and we will be here again tomorrow at 4 o'clock to answer your botany questions, your gardening questions, horticulture questions, anything to do with plants and growing them. So until then, goodbye and good gardening.